Hey, what's going on, guys? How's everybody doing? So last week in my Ganyu team building guide, I asked you guys to vote which team you guys would like to see a further breakdown on, and you guys spoke and you wanted to see the Ganyu reverse melt DPS team. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. We're going to be taking a look at all the heroes on that team, why they're specifically on the team, how to build your weapons, your artifacts, your skills, all that kind of stuff. So without further ado, let's hop right in and take a look at this team. So the team that we have chosen to take a look at today is the one on your screen. We got Ganyu, Xiangling, Bennett, and Sucrose. So why did we go with this team? Well, first up, Ganyu's biggest damage dealing reaction is going to be melt, or for the purposes of this video, reverse melt, because she's not going to be able to take advantage of the 2x multiplier like other pyro heroes. So, you know, like your Diluc or your Klee, they can get a 2x multiplier on melt. Well, Ganyu can only get 1.5x, but she still does a lot of damage, so that's not really a big issue. So we knew we wanted to have a pyro hero, and when we already have one pyro hero, why not just go for another and get that extra 25% attack boost? So that's what we've done. We've gone and built a Fervent Flames team. So we're going to be affected by cryo for 40% less time. Not that big of a deal. What is a big deal is we're getting that 25% attack boost. We don't have to work for it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Basically, the entire team gets a 25% attack boost, which is very, very nice. Now, specifically, why have we chosen the heroes on this team? Well, the first one that I paired with was Bennett. There are a number of reasons for choosing Bennett. One, like, come on, he's Bennett. I think everyone knows that Bennett's busted, but the reasons why he's so good. First of all, he heals, so he is the healer on this team. Second of all, he is a pyro hero, so we're going to be getting those reverse melt procs from Ganyu. Third, his burst is insane. He's going to be giving a lot of extra attack to Ganyu, and she really likes those stats, so that's going to be a really big benefit. But fourth, he's actually one of the best pyro supports in the game because he has a very strong pyro application. That's all talking about elemental gauges. If you don't know about elemental gauges, check out my video right up in the top right where we go all in depth about elemental gauges and how you can abuse them and get more reactions off your element applications. So then we had to go and pick another pyro support, and basically we have three options. We could have gone with Xiangling, we could have gone with Jinyan, or we could have gone with Amber. Klee and Diluc, we're taking those off the table because they are carries. They don't really support our team very well. So out of the three, who could we go with? Well, could have gone with Jinyan. The problem with Jinyan is she is more focused on increasing physical aspects of a character rather than doing pyro damage. She does do pyro damage, but it's not very consistent in the way she applies it. So I did take her out. Now we do have Amber. Amber is an interesting option. Her bunny is another taunt, and since Ganyu is, you know, a little squishy, her health pool is not that big. She can get killed pretty quickly, especially if she gets blindsided by an enemy while she's charging up her shot. So having another taunt on this team could be interesting. Also of note that Amber's bunny is actually another strong pyro applicator, again, if you're looking at elemental gauges. But overall, I went with Xiangling because she is overall just a stronger hero. Guba isn't great. Sometimes, you know, he can miss. It's not the greatest, but her Pyronado does do a lot of damage. It can also damage enemies who are getting close. You know, one of the things we're worried about, like I said, Ganyu's a little squishy. So if they get close, they're going to get caught up in that Pyronado. Very nice there. And finally, we have Sucrose. Sucrose is kind of the glue here, but the big thing that she's going to be doing is passing off elemental mastery to Ganyu, so that way she can get more damage off her melts. She also has a little built-in crowd control there with her burst and her skills. She can round up enemies, which is really nice for Ganyu, since with her charge shot and her bloom, she's going to be dealing AoE damage, so she wants enemies close together to deal as much damage as she can per shot. But what's also really good about her is that her burst has a mechanic called elemental absorption. So if it swirls with an element, let's say pyro, it's going to infuse pyro and keep applying pyro damage. So when we do that, it means that Ganyu can continuously melt over and over and over because Sucrose's burst is now going to apply pyro, essentially making her a third pyro unit on this team if we can line up our skills and bursts properly. Now, you might also ask why I didn't go with Venti in this role. Venti is a super solid option, no doubt about it. If you wanted to replace Sucrose with Venti, you absolutely could. Damage on his own is very good. We're just going with Sucrose because she can pass off elemental mastery to Ganyu. She's also just a little bit more accessible overall to players, so I do like her there. But also, if you wanted to, Sucrose does have access to a weapon that could change the way you play this team, and we'll go over that when we talk about Sucrose's weapons, but it's something that Venti does not have access to, and it could provide a huge burst of damage to Ganyu. So that's why we've selected the heroes we did. Now that we've talked about all the heroes in general, let's go in and break down their kits and how we want to build all these individual characters. So first up, of course, we got Ganyu, and let's jump right into her weapons. So If we're looking at weapons, of course her best in slot weapons are going to be 5-star weapons, right? We all know this, the 5-star weapons are super powerful. And the question is, do we want to go with Skyward Harp or Amos Bow? Technically, on paper, Amos Bow is better. So not only are you getting the attack substat increase, but you're also getting a flat percentage increase on your normal and charged attacks. Plus, you're getting an increase based on how long the arrow takes to hit its enemy. Now, of note, the bloom also takes this into consideration. Now, it will also take into account from when the charge attack actually hits to when the bloom hits. That's also going to increase these stacks. So the bloom is basically always going to have at least a 3-stack burst because the time from the charge shot hitting to the bloom hitting is actually 0.3 seconds. Then, of course, we have Skyward Harp, and Skyward Harp is my personal preference, although the performance of these bows is very similar. The difference here is that, of course, we're getting a crit rate on her bow as well as crit damage. That's absolutely insane. But your hits are also going to have a small chance to do a little AoE attack. Overall, this damage isn't going to be very strong compared to your regular attacks, but it is a nice little bonus. Now, the other thing to note is that Skyward Harp's base attack is way higher than Amos Bow. I mean, way higher is subjective, but it is higher in terms of base attack. Really, the difference here is that the passive on Amos Bow isn't going to apply any damage increase to either your skill or burst, and you can actually scale those pretty high. Now, that's specifically why I like to go with Skyward Harp, but technically on paper, Amos Bow is better out of the two 5-stars. Now, I am fully aware that most people are not going to have the luxury of choosing between these two bows, and a lot of people might not even have one of these bows. So let's go in and talk about the 4-star options, and there are 3 of your best choices. So in order, you're going to have your Prototype Crescent, you're going to have your Blackcliff Warbow, and lastly, your Viridescent Hunt. So at first glance, the fact that one of our best 4-star weapons is a craftable might seem like a godsend. However, there is a caveat to that. The Prototype Crescent will only outperform these other 2 bows if you can consistently get its passive off. And in order to do that, you're going to have to hit enemy weak spots. Now, not all enemies have weak spots, and even if they do, sometimes they're just hard to hit. Now, if you're one of those players who has bad aim, I'm one of them, or if you're playing like on mobile and it's very hard to aim, Prototype Crescent might actually not be one of your best options, even though it is a free-to-play weapon. Now, your other 2, Blackcliff Warbow is definitely going to be the better of the 2. Ganyu can kill things very quickly, and because she has a lot of built-in crit rate into her kit already, having that extra crit damage can be super helpful to get really big hits. Now, of note, this specific build, the Reverse Melt build, does not have the same, high crit rate that you can get on like a freeze build, so you will have to invest a little bit more into your crit rate in order to get those big crit hits. Now, we also have the Viridescent Hunt. I'm not personally a really big fan of this weapon. It's fine, it has a little bit of a CC bonus, but overall the damage of these other 2 bows just far surpass this one, even though it has crit rate. But again, Ganyu already has a lot of crit rate built into her kit, so we're trying to build her crit damage up more than her crit rate. Now, if you do need crit rate, this is an okay weapon to go with, but overall I like the other 2 options better. And finally, if you don't have any of these weapons and you're looking for a 3-star weapon, Sharpshooter's Oath is going to be your bow of choice. Moving on to Ganyu's artifacts, her best in slot set is going to be the 4-piece Wandering Troop. So with the 4-piece set bonus, you're increasing your charge attack damage by 35%. And on top of that, we're getting an increase in our Elemental Mastery, which is very important since we're talking about a melt build. We're talking about a lot of reaction damage. So while this set is really good, the downside is that it's actually really hard to farm. And if you're like me who thought like, hey, that's a really bad set, no one can really use it, so let me feed it into all my other artifacts. And then Ganyu came out, so I didn't have any and had to rebuild them. If you're in that category, you could go with a 2-piece Blizzard Strayer and 2-piece Gladiator. That will be her next best set. You could also replace those Gladiator pieces, because I know they're also very difficult to farm, with Noblesse Oblige, which won't increase her charge attack damage at all, but you will get a boost on her burst. You could also technically go with a 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set. Now, you kind of have to take into consideration that you're never going to get full potential out of it, because you're not going to get that 40% crit rate, because we're not freezing enemies here, but you can get a 20% crit rate bonus. But also keep in mind that because we're going to be melting, we're going to be consistently taking cryo off enemies. You will still be able to get it some of the time, but it's not going to be as consistent as the 4-piece Wanderer's Troop. Now, going to look into the stats of her artifact, her timepiece is very interesting. Now, for most players, it's going to make sense to go attack here. Now, you'll see that I actually have Elemental Mastery. That's for 1, because I'm kind of limited on Wanderer's Troop piece. And for 2, that crit damage though. But there is actually reason to go with Elemental Mastery here. So because there are diminishing returns with attack, if your Bennett is like really leveled up, has a high level weapon, he's C1, and he's basically just giving a ton of attack bonus, there's going to be diminishing returns with going with more attack percent. So because of that, there's actually reason to go with Elemental Mastery for your carry if they can get their attack super high. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going with Elemental Mastery here, but for most players, it's actually going to make more sense to go with attack percent. So I don't actually have the answer on what the point is where you should switch over to Elemental Mastery, but really you can choose between either Elemental Mastery or attack here. Now, as far as your cup goes, that's pretty easy. You want cryo damage bonus. For your circlet, this is where you can choose either crit damage or crit rate. For the most part, you're probably going to want to go with crit damage, assuming you can get some pretty decent substats in terms of crit rate, because again, Ganyu's going to be getting an additional 20% crit rate on her charge attacks through her passive, and normally I like to get my carries up to 40% crit rate before I start investing in crit damage. So because of that, it's going to be pretty easy to get her up to that 40%. You can of course go higher, but I like to go crit damage to go for those really big melt hits. And in terms of substats, we are of course looking for crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, elemental mastery, and energy recharge. Now, looking at her talents, the most important thing to be leveling up is her auto attack, because that is where most of her damage is coming from, and it scales, especially the bloom, very high. So together with her charge shot and her bloom, we're looking at 550% damage. That's massive. So make sure you get that up as high as possible. After that, you're going to be looking at your burst and finally your skill. So next up we have Xiangling, and first up we're going to take a look at her weapons. And her best in slot is going to be the Favonius Lance. Now, the reason we're going with a Favonius Lance is because we really want that energy recharge. As a support, we want to be keeping her burst up as much as possible, and Xiangling's burst is very expensive at 80 energy. So because of that, we're looking to get as much recharge as possible, so that way when she's off the field, she'll still be regenerating a lot of energy. Now, the Favonius Lance also has the added benefit of being able to create particles for the rest of our teammates, allowing them to get their bursts up faster as well. The thing about this, though, is that it only occurs when Xiangling crits, and it only happens when she's on field, and because we have a small window when she's on the field, when she uses her skill and burst, we're looking for those first, maybe even second hits to crit fairly consistently. So because of that, we might want to invest in her crit a little bit if we're going with this weapon. The other option is going to be a free-to-play option, and that is Prototype Star Glitter, though we don't really get any use out of the passive most of the time. Now, if you find that you're good with energy recharge, you could also go with one of the crit weapons, either Blackcliff Pole or Deathmatch, for a little bit of extra damage. Now, for her artifacts, you could go and build her as a Noblesse Oblige user. I always like to include one on my team because it's so universal. The thing is, though, I think Bennett fills this role better, so we're going to be having him be our 4-piece Noblage user. So what are we going to use instead? Well, we really want to increase that burst damage, so we're going to go with a 2-piece Noblage set. And what else we could do here is really just switch in a lot of different artifacts. So you could do a 2-piece Crimson Witch, you could do 2-piece Gladiator, you could do 2-piece Scholar or Exile, you could do 2-piece Gambler. There's a lot of different options. I'm not as much of a fan of the 4-piece sets just because they are going to have lower stats, you're going to have less substats on them, and overall they're just going to perform a little bit worse than your actual 5-star pieces. Because just remember, it is better to have good stats on your artifacts as opposed to mediocre stats with good bonuses. And as far as stats on your artifacts go, of course, for the timepiece, we're looking for energy recharge. We always want to keep that burst up if possible, or at least have access to it when it's off of cooldown. For the cup, we want either pyro damage or attack. Since pyro damage is what she's going to be doing most of the time, pyro damage would be beneficial. I just don't have one for her just yet. And of course, we have the circlet on her. And remember, if we're going with that Favonius Lance, we want to invest in her crit rate a little bit. But if you don't have enough crit pieces to go around, attack will do just fine here. And as far as her talents go, really, she's just here for pyro application, so you really don't need to invest in her talents that much. But if you do, I would recommend going with her burst first, then her skill, and finally, if you even wanted to, her auto attack, although we're really not going to be using that on this team specifically. Next up, we have Bennett. Ah, yes, Bennett, the hero that is so good that I think a lot of people are getting sick of seeing. But look, he is just that good. So as far as his weapon goes, what are we looking for? Really, we're just looking for a weapon with a high base attack. The thing with his burst is that his burst is going to transfer over a certain percentage of his base attack to whoever is standing in his circle. This is not his overall attack, just his base attack. So we're looking for his level to be leveled up and his weapon to be leveled up to get that base attack as high as possible. So really, whatever weapon you have that's leveled up is going to be pretty good on him. But if you're looking for a specific weapon, we're going to be looking for energy recharge weapons. Festering Desire is actually one of his best ones, and it was just free, so pretty much everyone should have it as long as you participated in the event. But really, anything with energy recharge will work just fine on him here. But really, anything with energy recharge is going to be a real benefit here, and of course, just make sure to level it up so that way Ganyu can get as much attack percent as she can. Now moving on to our artifacts, as I said before, Bennett is going to be our 4-piece Noblesse user. He's basically our buffer. From his burst, from the 4-piece set bonus, he's going to be giving a lot of attack over to Ganyu, and that is the point. Now, if you don't have a 4-piece Noblesse set, just use the same guidelines as Ganyu. They basically fall into the same category there. Now, as far as stat recommendations go, I actually have 2. So the first recommendation I'm going to have is based on the fact that you have a C1 Bennett. So if this is the case, we're going to be building his timepiece with energy recharge because we want to make sure we get that burst up as much as possible. This is like the most important burst on the team. For Cup, we have pyro damage because we want to be building him to do more damage, and pyro damage is where most of his damage is going to lie. Lastly, for your circlet, it's going to be a crit stat. Whether it's crit rate or crit damage, you got to look at your substats on your other pieces to see which you need more of. So now the second build is if you don't have a C1 Bennett. If your Bennett is C0, this build is going to change a little bit, and I'll tell you why in a second. So the way we're going to change this is we're going to change his circlet to HP and potentially even his cup to HP. So here's why. Bennett's heals are going to stop at 70%, regardless of whether he's C0 or C1. Whenever a hero reaches over that threshold of 70%, his healing is going to stop. However, when you get to C1, it removes the restriction that if your character is over 70%, then they get the attack boost. So when you're C0, if you're 69% or under, you're receiving no additional attack boost from Bennett's burst. So what we want to do is make sure that we can get our heroes in the circle as high as possible in terms of their health as fast as we can. So we're looking to get big ticks with Bennett. Now, Bennett's ticks, as per usual, are more than fine. His healing is very good, but because we're looking to get over that 70% and even overshoot it sometimes, we want those ticks to be really big so that way we can make big steps over that 70%. So because of that, we'll be looking to build HP into his kit to increase the range of his heals. But for those C1 builds, it removes that restriction, and his healing is already good enough. So we don't really need more healing, so we're just going to build him for more damage and just kill things faster. Moving on to his talents, and you guessed it, pretty much just invest in his burst. His burst is absolutely insane. It's going to increase the amount of heals you get. It's going to increase the amount of attack that goes over to whoever is standing in your radius. It's absolutely insane. Once you go ahead and like max that out as far as you can go and invest in his skill a little bit. And again, his auto attack, not super important here. Finally, we come to Sucrose, who is really like the glue of this team. So she's going to be our CC hero, but she's also going to be our Elemental Mastery transfer character over to Ganyu. So the name of the game is going to be Elemental Mastery, Elemental Mastery, Elemental Mastery, Elemental Mastery. So the reason for that is because once you get to her Ascension 4, whenever she gets a hit with her skill or burst, she's going to transfer over 20% of her Elemental Mastery to your other teammates. So we want to get her Elemental Mastery very high, so that way she can pass off a big portion of that to Ganyu, and then she can do even more damage with her melt reactions. Her best in slot weapon is going to be Sacrificial Fragments. This weapon is super powerful. First of all, it already has Elemental Mastery built into the substat. That's already incredible. But also, it's going to have a chance to reset your skill's cooldown. Sucrose is actually a very good character when it comes to energy generation. Her skill generates 4 anemo particles. So if we get her to C1, now she has an extra skill that she has access to. We now have 2 chances to reset the cooldown of one of those, bringing us up to 3 total skills. That's a lot of energy generation. And that's just basically going to fuel all our heroes' bursts for even more damage on top of the Elemental Mastery we're already giving to all our other heroes. It's just going to be easily her best weapon, even above the 5-star weapons. Now, because we're looking for Elemental Mastery specifically, our weapon choices aren't really that wide open. You could go with Map of Mare, that's kind of your free-to-play option. But other than those 2, you're really just looking at 3-star weapons. And out of all of them, it really doesn't matter. Just whichever one you can get refined up and leveled up. But a really interesting choice that you could go with if you wanted to is Thrilling Tales of Dragonslayer. Now, this is going to be a little bit different of a build. We probably won't be going so heavily into Elemental Mastery, but the passive on this is whenever this character that's wielding wielding it switches over, it's going to pass a huge attack bonus, especially if it's up to Refinement 5, and it's only a 3-star weapon, so it's pretty easy to do. Once it's Refinement 5, you're transferring over almost 50% attack bonus to whatever hero you switch into. So if we switch over to Ganyu, she's getting an additional 50% attack, which is really big. However, you kind of got to keep in mind that, remember what we said earlier, is that there is diminishing returns on attack, so this may not be the best build. It's also a little bit more restrictive because you do have to go from Sucrose into Ganyu basically every time for the bonus, so it does restrict your gameplay a little bit, but it is an added variation that you could do on this team. Now, you might be thinking that we'd go with a 4-piece instructor set since we are looking for elemental mastery on this team. However, the bonus for going Viridescent Veneer is just way too high, increasing her swirl damage, but also decreasing the resistance of whatever element you swirl is just so big. It's going to help us do so much damage with Ganyu's charge shot. It's actually insane. You could go with the 4-piece instructor though if you're not farming 5-star artifacts yet, or you could go with like a 2-and-2 split depending on what you have access to. So since we're mostly worried about passing off elemental mastery or just like swirling a pyro so that way we can do more melt damage over time, we don't really have to worry about leveling up any of her talents if you're choked on resources. But if you do want to focus on her skill and burst, her auto attack really not very useful here. So that is the team. Those are the builds. I'm going to be getting out of here. I'm going to let you guys watch the gameplay showcase here at the end of the video. Before I go, guys, hopefully you did like the video. If you did and you want to see some more content from me, you can head over to my Twitch page, twitch.tv/xjazze, or you can support me right here on YouTube by clicking the red subscribe button. Like the video if you liked it. Click that notification bell. That way you never miss a video. And if you want to join our community over on Discord, link will be down in the description below. But that's it for me today. I'm going to leave you guys with the showcase video. Please enjoy.
Evolutionary process going on, but mankind won't be destroyed.